The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the palace library as Prince Alexander sorted through dusty boxes from the estate sale. His grandmother, Queen Isabella, had passed away 3 months ago, and the royal family was still organizing her vast collection of personal belongings. Alexander had volunteered for this task, hoping to find some connection to the grandmother he barely knew. Queen Isabella had always been a distant figure in his life. While other grandchildren spoke of warm hugs and bedtime stories, Alexander remembered only formal dinners and stiff conversations about royal duty. His father, King Charles, rarely spoke of his mother beyond official matters. There was always an unspoken tension, a wall of silence that Alexander never understood. As he lifted another stack of old photographs, his hand brushed against something leather-bound wedged between two boxes. Curious, he pulled out what appeared to be a journal, its brown cover worn with age. The golden initials, I.M., were barely visible on the front. Isabella Marie, his grandmother's maiden name. Alexander opened the journal carefully, the pages yellowed and fragile. The first entry was dated 60 years ago, written in his grandmother's elegant handwriting. He began to read, expecting to find mundane daily observations or royal appointment schedules. Instead, the words jumped out at him with surprising intimacy. Today, I met him again. Thomas, my heart still races when I think of our conversation by the garden fountain. If only circumstances were different. If only I weren't engaged to Charles's father. If only I were free to choose my own path. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. His grandfather, King William, had been dead for 20 years, but Alexander had never heard of any Thomas. He continued reading, each page revealing more of his grandmother's hidden emotional life. The journal entries painted a picture of a young woman trapped between duty and desire. Isabella had been only 19 when her engagement to the future king was announced. The marriage had been arranged to strengthen political alliances, a common practice among royalty, but one that clearly weighed heavily on young Isabella's heart. Thomas asked me to run away with him today, another entry read. He has secured passage to America where we could start fresh, away from all of this. He doesn't understand that I cannot abandon my family, my country. The scandal would destroy everything my parents have worked for. And yet, when I'm with him, I dream of a simple life. A small house, with a garden. Children who would grow up free from the weight of crowns and ceremony. Alexander found himself completely absorbed in his grandmother's words. This was not the cold, dignified queen he had known. This was a young woman full of passion, dreams, and heartbreak. He turned page after page, watching as Isabella's wedding day approached and her entries became more desperate. Tomorrow I marry William. Thomas has stopped coming to the gardens. His sister told me he left for America last week. I understand. I do not blame him. I would have left too if I could. Mother says I will learn to love William in time. That duty and love often grow together. I smile and nod, but inside, something has died. The entries after the wedding were shorter, more formal. Isabella wrote about state dinners, royal tours, and eventually the birth of her son Charles, Alexander's father. But between the lines of duty and protocol, Alexander could sense the sadness that permeated every word. Years passed in the journal. Isabella chronicled her husband's increasing coldness, his affairs that everyone pretended not to notice, and her own growing isolation within the palace walls. She threw herself into charity work, finding purpose in helping others when her personal life felt empty. Then, 30 years after her wedding, a new name appeared in the journal that made Alexander's hands tremble. Charles confronted me today about the letters. I thought I had hidden them well enough, but nothing escapes my son's suspicious nature. He demanded to know who Thomas was, why I had kept his letters all these years. I tried to explain that they were just memories, remnants of a youth long past. But Charles wouldn't listen. He accused me of terrible things, of betraying his father, of living a lie. Alexander felt his stomach turn. His father had known about Thomas. All these years of coldness between father and grandmother suddenly made sense. The next entry was even more shocking. Charles has given me an ultimatum. Destroy all evidence of Thomas or he will tell William everything. He says he's protecting the family's reputation, but I see the hurt in his eyes. He thinks I never loved his father, never loved him. How can I explain that love isn't always simple? That I did my duty, raised my children, supported my husband, even if my heart belonged elsewhere? The young don't understand compromise. They see everything in black and white. Alexander had to stop reading. His hands were shaking now, and tears blurred his vision. He thought about his own father, always so rigid, so obsessed with propriety and royal image. Had this discovery broken something in him? Had learning about his mother's lost love made him suspicious of all emotions? He wiped his eyes and continued reading. The entries became sparse after the confrontation with Charles. Isabella wrote about burning Thomas's letters, each one a small death. She described watching the papers curl and blacken in the fireplace, years of words turning to ash. I kept one, she wrote. Just one letter. The last one he sent before leaving for America. Charles doesn't know. I hid it where no one would think to look. If I cannot have the man I loved, at least I can keep his words. My dearest Isabella, I will wait for you always, in this life or the next. Forever yours, Thomas. Alexander's heart ached for his grandmother. He pictured her hiding that single letter, checking on it over the years like a hidden treasure, living an entire life of duty while carrying this secret love. The final entries in the journal were recent, written in a shakier hand. Isabella knew she was dying. I think about Thomas often now. I wonder if he's still alive, if he married, if he found happiness. I hope he did. I hope he forgot about the foolish young princess who chose duty over love. Though I suspect, like me, he never quite let go. First loves rarely fade completely. They live in us, shaping who we become, teaching us the weight of choices. The very last entry was dated just a week before Isabella's death. I've decided to leave this journal where it might be found. Perhaps it's selfish, but I want someone to know that I was more than just a queen. I was a woman who loved deeply, who sacrificed greatly, who lived with her choices even when they broke her heart. If Charles finds it, perhaps he'll understand. If my grandchildren find it, perhaps they'll choose differently. Love, real love, is so rare. Don't let duty steal it from you. Alexander closed the journal and sat in the dusty library, overwhelmed by the weight of his grandmother's story. He thought about all the state dinners where she had sat silent and regal, all the times she had seemed distant and cold. Now he understood. She had built walls to protect herself from showing the pain she carried. Alexander remained in the library until darkness fell, unable to move from his spot on the floor. The journal lay in his lap like a living thing, its secrets burning through the leather cover. He knew he should tell someone about his discovery, but who? His father would likely demand the journal be destroyed, just as he had forced Isabella to burn Thomas's letters all those years ago. As moonlight replaced sunlight in the dusty room, Alexander made a decision. He would investigate further. His grandmother had mentioned hiding one letter, and if it still existed, he needed to find it. He owed her that much. Over the following days, Alexander threw himself into the search. He examined every book in Isabella's private library, checked behind every painting, and even carefully inspected the linings of her jewelry boxes. The palace staff whispered about the prince's strange behavior, but Alexander didn't care. He was driven by a need to understand the woman his grandmother truly was. It was while going through Isabella's personal effects that Alexander found something unexpected. hidden in the false bottom of an antique music box, was not the letter he sought, but a photograph. The black and white image showed a young Isabella standing beside a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, on the back in faded ink. Isabella and Thomas, summer 1962, Our Secret Garden. Alexander studied the photograph intently. His grandmother looked radiant, her face alive with joy he had never seen in any official royal portrait. Thomas had his arm around her shoulders in a protective, tender gesture. They looked like any young couple in love, not a princess and her forbidden romance. This discovery led Alexander to the palace gardens. He spent hours wandering the paths, trying to identify the location in the photograph. Finally, in a forgotten corner near the old greenhouse, he found it. The fountain was dry now, overtaken by ivy, but it was unmistakably the same one from the picture. As he cleared away some of the overgrowth, Alexander noticed loose stones at the fountain's base. His heart racing, he carefully removed them one by one until he found what he was looking for, a metal box, rusted with age but intact. Inside the box were 3 items that made Alexander's hands shake. The first was Thomas's final letter, preserved exactly as Isabella had described. The second was a small golden locket containing a miniature version of the photograph he'd found earlier. But it was the third item that made Alexander sink to his knees on the garden path. It was a birth certificate. The name on it wasn't familiar, but the date made Alexander's blood run cold. It was dated 8 months after Isabella's wedding to King William. The father's name was left blank, but the mother was listed as Isabella Marie Windsor. His grandmother had given birth to a child that no one knew about. Alexander's mind raced. A secret child? How was this possible? He thought back through the journal entries, remembering a gap of several months where Isabella had written nothing. She had mentioned being unwell and retiring to the country estate for rest and recuperation. Now the truth was horrifyingly clear. With trembling fingers, Alexander unfolded a letter that was tucked behind the birth certificate. It was in his grandmother's handwriting, apparently never sent. My dearest Thomas, our daughter was born this morning. She has your eyes and my stubborn chin. The midwife says she's healthy and strong. I've named her Marie, after my middle name, so I can keep a part of her with me always. The arrangements have been made. A good family, unable to have children of their own, will raise her. They've promised to send updates through my trusted lady's maid. I will never hold her again after today. This is my punishment for our love, but I cannot regret loving you. I only regret that our daughter will never know her true parents. Forever yours, Isabella. Alexander felt tears streaming down his face. Somewhere in the world, his grandmother's first child had lived a life completely separate from the royal family. His father had a half-sister he never knew existed. Alexander had an aunt who might still be alive, unaware of her royal blood. The implications were staggering. If this information became public, it would cause a scandal that would rock the monarchy. Alexander understood now why his grandmother had hidden these items so carefully. But he also understood why she had left clues, why she had wanted someone to eventually find the truth. Returning to the palace with his discoveries, Alexander locked himself in his room to think. He pulled out the journal again, reading it with new understanding. Every mention of charity work with orphanages, every anonymous donation to children's causes, took on new meaning. Isabella had spent her life trying to atone for giving up her daughter. As he researched the name on the birth certificate, Alexander discovered that Marie had been adopted by a middle-class family in northern England. She had grown up to become a teacher, married a local doctor, and had 3 children of her own. According to public records, she had passed away 5 years ago, never knowing her true heritage. But her children were alive. Alexander's cousins, living ordinary lives, unaware they had royal blood. The weight of this knowledge was overwhelming. Did they have a right to know? Would knowing improve their lives or destroy them? Alexander's investigation led him to more discoveries. In Isabella's correspondence, carefully coded references revealed that she had secretly watched Marie from afar. School plays attended by a mysterious benefactor, anonymous scholarships that appeared just when needed, a guardian angel who ensured Marie's life, while ordinary, was never wanting. Late one night, Alexander found another crucial piece of the puzzle. In the palace archives, he discovered records of a substantial trust fund established by Isabella decades ago. The beneficiary was listed only as M.S., Marie Sutherland, the married name his aunt had taken. Even after Marie's death, the trust continued to support her children's education and needs. The more Alexander learned, the more he understood the depth of his grandmother's sacrifice and suffering. She had given up her first child to protect the monarchy, lived a life devoid of true love to fulfill her duty, and carried these secrets for over 60 years. Yet she had found ways to care for her lost daughter from the shadows, being a mother in the only way she could. Alexander also discovered something that chilled him to the bone. Among Charles's private papers, which Alexander accessed using his royal privileges, was evidence that his father had eventually discovered the truth about Marie. A private investigator's report from 20 years ago detailed Marie's life and confirmed her parentage through discreet DNA testing. His father had known. He had known he had a half-sister and had chosen to keep the secret buried. Worse, there were legal documents ensuring that if Marie or her descendants ever tried to claim royal recognition or inheritance, they would be met with immediate legal action. Charles had not only rejected his mother's love story, but had actively worked to ensure her first child remained forever excluded from the family. The cruelty of it made Alexander physically ill. As dawn broke, Alexander sat surrounded by evidence of a life lived in shadow and secrecy. He thought about his own life, the expectations placed upon him, the suitable matches his parents were already discussing. He thought about his grandmother's words. Love, real love is so rare. Don't let duty steal it from you. But he also thought about Marie's children, living their lives peacefully, unburdened by royal expectations and protocols. Would revealing the truth to them be a gift or a curse? The media attention alone would destroy their privacy forever. Yet didn't they deserve to know where they came from, to understand their true heritage? Alexander picked up the photograph of Isabella and Thomas one more time. His grandmother looked so young, so hopeful, so unaware of the pain that lay ahead. He traced their faces with his finger. These two people whose love had created ripples still felt 60 years later. The weight of his discoveries pressed down on Alexander as he prepared for what he knew he must do. After a sleepless night wrestling with his conscience, he had made his decision. He would confront his father with everything he had learned. The secrets had poisoned their family for too long. King Charles was in his study when Alexander entered, carrying the journal and the box of evidence. His father looked up from state papers, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption. That irritation quickly turned to something else when he saw what Alexander held. "Where did you find that?" Charles's voice was dangerously quiet, his eyes fixed on his mother's journal. "In the library," Alexander replied, standing straighter. "I've read it. All of it." The color drained from Charles's face. For a moment, father and son stood frozen, decades of unspoken pain hanging between them. Then Charles sank into his chair, suddenly looking older than his years. "I told her to destroy it," he said weakly. "She destroyed the letters, but she kept the journal, and other things." Alexander set the metal box on his father's desk. "You knew about Marie." Charles's hands clenched into fists. "That name is not to be spoken in this palace." "She was your sister." Alexander's voice cracked with emotion. "Your mother gave up her own child, and when you found out, you threatened her descendants with legal action if they ever sought their birthright. How could you be so cruel? Cruel? Charles stood abruptly, rage replacing his earlier shock. You think I was cruel? Do you have any idea what it was like to discover that your entire life was built on lies? That your mother loved another man, had another child she cared for more than you? That's not true. Grandmother loved you. Did she? Charles laughed bitterly. Or was I just the spare she was forced to have? The legitimate heir to replace the daughter she really wanted? Every time she looked at me, do you think she saw her son, or did she see the child of the man she was forced to marry? Alexander watched his father pace the room like a caged animal. He had never seen the king lose control like this. Never seen beneath the rigid exterior to the wounded child underneath. I found her crying once, Charles continued, his voice breaking. I was 7 years old. She was holding a baby's booty, sobbing like her heart was broken. When she saw me, she hid it away and pretended nothing was wrong. But I knew. Even then, I knew there was someone she loved more than us. She gave up everything for duty, Alexander said softly. She gave up the man she loved, the child they created, any chance at happiness. She did it for the crown, for you. For me? Charles whirled on his son. She did it for herself to avoid scandal. And then she spent the rest of her life pining for what she'd lost, making the rest of us feel like consolation prizes. Alexander pulled out the photograph of Isabella and Thomas. Look at this. Look at her face. When did you ever see her this happy? Charles stared at the photograph, and Alexander saw something break in his father's eyes. The king reached out with trembling fingers to touch his mother's smiling face in the picture. Never, Charles whispered. I never saw her look like that. She tried to love you, Alexander said gently. The journal makes that clear. But she was broken by what she had to give up. Can't you understand that? Can't you forgive her for being human? Charles sank back into his chair, the photograph still in his hands. Do you know what it's like to grow up knowing you're not enough? That no matter what you achieve, you'll never be the child your mother really wanted. Alexander moved closer to his father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as a king, not as an authority figure, but as a damaged man who had spent his life trying to earn love that he believed was given elsewhere. But she did love you, Alexander insisted. She wrote about you constantly in her journal. Your first words, your first steps. How proud she was when you graduated from university. Yes, she mourned what she lost, but she loved what she had too. Charles set down the photograph and picked up Marie's birth certificate. His hands shook as he read it. I had them watched, you know. Marie's children. I told myself it was to protect the family, to ensure they never made claims against us. But really, I wanted to know what they were like. My sister's children. What are they like? Alexander asked softly. Normal, Charles said with a bitter smile. Happy. The eldest is a doctor like his father. The daughter teaches primary school like Marie did. The youngest runs a small business. They have barbecues on Sundays and take holidays to Spain. They're everything we can never be. Free. Alexander felt his own tears starting to fall. The waste of it all, the unnecessary pain passed down through generations like a cursed inheritance. We could tell them, give them the choice to know. No. Charles's voice was firm. Your grandmother was right about one thing. Some secrets are better kept. They have good lives, untainted by all of this. He gestured around the opulent study with disgust. Let them keep their freedom. But the journal should be destroyed, Charles finished. Then, seeing Alexander's expression, he sighed. But it won't be. You're too much like her, too sentimental. Keep it if you must. But promise me it goes no further than this room. Alexander nodded slowly, understanding that this was as much healing as his father could manage. What about Thomas? He might still be alive. Charles pulled open a drawer in his desk and withdrew a file. Thomas Hartwell. Died 10 years ago in Boston. He became a literature professor, married a fellow teacher, had 4 children. By all accounts, he lived a good life. Did he ever try to contact her? Once. On her 40th wedding anniversary. He sent a card to the palace with no message, just his initials. She kept it in her jewelry box. Charles smiled sadly. I thought it was from a secret admirer. I teased her about it. She just smiled and changed the subject. Both men sat in silence, the weight of the revealed secrets filling the room. Finally, Charles spoke again, his voice raw with suppressed emotion. I spent my whole life hating him. This Thomas. This man I'd never met who had stolen my mother's heart before I was even born. But reading this, he touched the journal, I realized he was just a young man in love. They were both so young, too young to understand the cost of their choices. Alexander watched as his father opened the journal and began to read. Charles's face crumpled as he took in his mother's words, the pain and longing she had carried silently for decades. When he reached the entry about burning Thomas's letters, a sob escaped from the king's throat. I made her do that, he wept. I stood there and watched her burn them, feeling righteous and vindicated. I thought I was protecting our family's honor. But I was just a hurt child lashing out at his mother. Alexander had never seen his father cry. Charles had been stoic at his own father's funeral, composed during national tragedies, always the perfect picture of royal control. But now he wept openly, grieving for the mother he had never truly known and the sister he had refused to acknowledge. She asked me once, Charles choked out between sobs. Near the end, she asked if I could forgive her. I didn't know what she meant. I thought she was confused from the medication, but she was asking about all of it. Thomas, Marie, the life she had lived. And I just patted her hand and told her to rest. I never told her I forgave her. I never told her I understood. Alexander moved around the desk and did something he had never done before. He embraced his father. Charles stiffened at first, unaccustomed to physical affection, but then collapsed against his son, 60 years of suppressed grief pouring out. She loved you, Alexander repeated over and over. She loved you so much. She was proud of you. She wrote it all down. Look, here. He fumbled for a specific page in the journal, one he had memorized. Listen. Charles gave his first speech to Parliament today. He was magnificent, poised, intelligent, every inch a king. Whatever mistakes I have made, whatever pain I carry, I did one thing right. I raised a son who will be a great leader. My love for Thomas was my youth, but Charles is my legacy, my pride, my redemption. Charles pulled back, wiping his eyes with hands that shook. She wrote that? She wrote so much more. Pages and pages about you, about your accomplishments, your kindness to your subjects, your dedication to duty. Yes, she loved Thomas. Yes, she mourned Marie. But she loved you too. Differently, perhaps, but no less deeply. Father and son sat together as the morning sun climbed higher, reading through the journal together. They found passages where Isabella worried about Charles's happiness, where she celebrated his marriage, where she rejoiced at Alexander's birth. They discovered a grandmother and mother who was complex, flawed, but ultimately human in her capacity to love multiple people in different ways. What do we do now? Alexander asked finally. Charles closed the journal gently, treating it now like the treasure it was, rather than the threat he had once perceived it to be. We honor her memory, not the perfect queen she pretended to be, but the real woman she was. We learn from her mistakes and her sacrifices. And Marie's children? Charles was quiet for a long moment. We watch over them, as she did. Anonymous scholarships if needed, opportunities that appear at the right moments. We can't acknowledge them publicly. The scandal would destroy their lives as well as shake the monarchy. But we can ensure they never want for anything. The trust fund grandmother set up will continue, Charles finished, and be increased. It's what she would have wanted. Alexander felt a shift in the room, in their relationship. The walls built by secrets and resentment had finally begun to crumble. His father was still the king, still formal and duty-bound, but now Alexander understood why. Charles had built his own walls to protect himself from the pain of feeling unloved, just as Isabella had built hers to hide her broken heart. "There's one more thing," Alexander said, pulling out the locket. "I think you should have this." Charles took the small golden locket, opening it to reveal the photograph of Isabella and Thomas. Instead of the anger Alexander expected, his father simply looked sad. "She was so beautiful," Charles murmured. "So young." They both were. He closed the locket and held it tightly. "Thank you for bringing me this, for making me face what I should have faced years ago." Over the following weeks, Alexander watched his father change in subtle ways. Charles visited Isabella's grave daily, sometimes talking softly to the headstone. He quietly increased funding to the charities his mother had supported. Most surprisingly, he began to show affection more openly, as if Isabella's journal had given him permission to express emotions he had buried. One evening, Charles called Alexander to his study. On the desk was a new document, a secret codicil to the royal will acknowledging Marie's children as family, ensuring their protection and support in perpetuity, even if they could never be publicly recognized. "It's what she would have wanted," Charles said simply. "What I should have done years ago." Alexander thought about his grandmother's final words in the journal. "If my grandchildren find it, perhaps they'll choose differently." He realized she hadn't just meant choosing love over duty. She had meant choosing forgiveness over resentment, understanding over judgment, and compassion over pride. The journal remained in the family's private archives, a testament to a woman who had loved deeply and suffered quietly. But its discovery had broken the cycle of pain that had plagued 3 generations. In revealing her secrets, Isabella had finally brought healing to her broken family. As Alexander stood on the palace balcony that night looking out over the city, he thought about the ordinary family living their lives somewhere in northern England, unaware of their royal connection. Perhaps that was Isabella's final gift to her firstborn, a life free from the golden cage that had trapped her. And perhaps her gift to those who remained in that cage was the truth that even queens were human, that love and duty could coexist, and that forgiveness, though sometimes delayed by decades, could still heal the deepest wounds. The prince touched the pocket where he kept a copy of his grandmother's photograph, a reminder that beneath every crown beats a human heart, capable of great love and tremendous sacrifice. The secrets were out, the tears had been shed, and finally, after 60 years, Isabella could rest in peace.